This is a Balanced Brain podcast with your hosts, Melanie Nicholson and Sean Clift.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to the Balanced Brain podcast. My name's Sean Clift. I'm joined by my good friend and co-host, Melanie Nicholson. How are you, Melanie?
I'm good, thanks, Sean. All well down here, and yeah.
Absolutely beautiful up here in Brisbane today. It's Saturday. It's hot, it's sunny, it's humid, it's tropical, it's great. So, hey, Mel, we're going to do an end-of-year recap. It's a couple of weeks from Christmas. It's been a massive year. We got a lot to talk about. But what I thought, you sent me some really information. So great information the other day. So I thought, let's start with that. Tell me about the top 5 Google searches for 2021. What'd you find?
Yeah, they just released it a couple of days ago. And yeah, I just found it really fascinating. Number 1 was how to maintain mental health. So it was searched more globally this year than ever before. So
wow.
Number 1. Yeah. So I guess I don't think that's a surprise to anyone listening.
Yeah, neither do I. But it's interesting to see that it's maintain your mental health. So it's not, mental health issues or whatever, it's maintain
it.
So what do you reckon? What do you think people are looking for? What's your thoughts?
When I was thinking about this, I was thinking about how I was thinking this in terms of the nervous system. Like every week, something different changes, something comes out, either we're locked down or we're not locked down, or we've got these restrictions, this is happening, and that's happening all around the world, right? So it's just, to me, it's about keeping that equilibrium, when there's just so much out of your control. It doesn't feel like you can control anything anymore. And I think it is just how to maintain that state of inner wellness to me, like when nothing outside is.
Yeah, right. Well, I just did a bit of an experiment and I just Googled that myself. So I thought, well, I'll have a look, how to maintain your mental health. So a lot of the things, Melanie, that comes up when you do a search like that is a lot of the things that we've talked about over the last year or so, which is meditation, exercise, communication, keeping in contact with friends and loved ones. So it's a lot of the themes that we've discussed. So it's really interesting that people are really, that's their main focus. I mean, it's completely bizarre to me that the number 1 isn't COVID, which is kind of all we hear about all the time, and the news and the media, and everyone just seems to be that's the only focus that everyone seems to talk about. But realistically, people aren't searching for that.
No, it's not even in the top 5. It's not even in the top 5. So nothing related to that at all. So yeah, I guess we're just trying to find, and it's simple stuff from what you're saying, like it's everything that we've spoken about on the podcast and all of our episodes,
Yeah, I mean, diet and exercise as well. Probably maintaining, alcohol consumption and things like that.
Yeah, I know that's been heavily searched as well, because that kept coming up as well.
And I mean, we've had some fantastic guests over the years. I mean, Clint was a great guest that talked about him getting off the booze and how it changed his life. We had our guest Courtney talking about diet and exercise. We did a great episode on meditation. So,
and we had Casey talk about the importance of nature and getting out in nature. I think that's really been important as well in maintaining mental health, being outside.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So
I totally agree. And that's really interesting when you scroll through those results, when you do Google search that phrase, how to maintain your mental health. A lot of those things we've sort of touched on over the last 12 months. So that's very interesting. What about number 2?
Number 2 was soulmate was searched more than ever before in 2021. And I thought that was, I was blown away by that, because for me personally, I've always thought that I don't think people do give up their idea of a soulmate, but to use that specific word wasn't like how to find a boyfriend or a husband. It was soulmate. It was very romantic. So
it's beautiful in a way.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. I mean, when I saw that, I just thought, there was a sadness to it too, because I know that people, particularly the single friends I have, and I was single for a long time myself, they've just been trying to find ways to get out and about and meet people and meet potential partners. And there's some people who felt like they've robbed 2 years of their romantic life in doing that, and potentially finding someone to have children with. And so I know that is coming up.
Well, I mean, it's just harder, isn't it? I mean, I guess there's the internet. So there's internet dating and sites like Tinder and that kind of thing, which is exploded, I guess. But it's harder to find that personal connection now, I suppose. So,
Yeah.
Like people are working from home, they're meeting on Zoom, they're working virtually. It's harder to meet people, I guess.
I was actually just reading a blog post about I think they're in Melbourne, and they were saying that they can go out, obviously, if you're vaccinated, but they're actually finding their social skills have just dissolved, and they're actually nervous about going out and how they will relate, not just to finding a partner, but friends and family, and just even reconnecting on that really basic social level, and how that's kind of been affected.
It's fascinating that that's number 2. I mean, in a way it's beautiful and in a way it's sad, but it's very interesting either way. I mean, it's such an important thing, that human connection, and how often do we talk about how important that is, and it's just much more difficult, I guess.
Yeah.
All right, what's number 3?
Number 3, body positivity.
Wow. Okay. Number 3. Well, look, we heard about that. The report that Instagram itself came out with in regards to young women and how damaging Instagram was to young women. So that's the first thing that pops to my mind when we look at that. How about you? What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I also think that we were reading a lot about initial lockdowns where people were just eating and eating because it's almost like a survival instinct, right? And then it's comfort. I think there's a lot of comfort eating going on. And to me, that's also around control, like what can I control and what would make me, it's pleasurable eating, right? Good food's pleasurable. So I think I think lockdowns have had a big part of people understand their relationship to food. I find it interesting in terms of the Instagram stuff, because I actually think there is less, to me, devotion towards those Instagram stars. I think this has shown people that kind of looks superficial, even more superficial than it normally would.
Yeah, I agree, but at the same time, from a male point of view, it was never really anything that when I was younger that you'd really kind of think about your body image. Whereas I think younger guys today, younger men today, have much more of a focus about, what their body looks like. So I think that I think it'd be surprising to see how many young males are searching body positivity as well.
I would not be surprised at that at all. And you're right, like particularly like guys between 20 and 30, I know on Instagram, and it's about having the big muscles, and, like steroid use has gone up dramatically. So that's definitely something that's affecting.
Yeah. So I think that, with the prevalence of social media now, body image is important to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that can be a positive thing. I mean, there's obviously, a massive market out there for gym now, and health programs and health and well-being programs and fitness programs. So there's got to be a lot of positive sides to it also. But I think there is that kind of, fear that it's, what happened to women for many, many years with those body image issues, I think is happening to men now as well.
I agree. And I'd say some of that is also around control. It's coming back to what is within what can I actually influence and look after at the moment, when the whole world is always constantly changing around me.
Yeah.
So I think
absolutely. All right. What's number 4?
Affirmations. searches for affirmations reached an all-time high. So I've loved a little affirmation over the years. But I was quite surprised about that.
Well, I'm surprised it's number 4. I'm not surprised that it's up high, but in the top 5, that is very interesting. So, we've used affirmations ourselves, Melanie. Like, I mean, especially during meditations and stuff like that can be very positive.
Yeah, I've got one on my computer right now. Do you want me to read it out?
Absolutely.
Every day, in every way, I'm aligning closer and closer to my higher self.
Okay, great. So where do you get that? Do you get that from an app, or do you just have something that you find each day, or how do you find that sort of stuff?
To be honest, I've seen quite a lot on Instagram. I've also got a lot of books, my bookshelf, that have affirmations. I've probably followed them for quite a long time. I'm not very disciplined with that sort of stuff, so I do just like to have one that resonates. I'm not.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I think it's a good way to.
So when you sent that to me, when you sent me this list last night, I was having looked through before we recorded today, and there are so many apps that you can download now that are just affirmation apps.
Yeah.
And you can sort of, like work out or sort of highlight what sort of things you want, whether they are body positivity ones or whether they're mental health or whether they're motivation or fitness ones. It's a big growth area, I think.
Well, it's interesting. I found, because I'm still doing some coaching, I found a box of affirmations called Why I Love Myself. And they're really resonating with young women, teenage girls, and they're incredible. So it's a whole box of affirmations. And I haven't used that before in coaching, but I think people are wanting to just go back to basics like that, rather than the cognitive, like going through all your behaviors and your patterns. It is just getting around to basics like that. And even affirmations aren't just fancy words, that they have powerful ways to make us question and think about things. And it's a good way when you're saying them out loud to see if you actually believe them too. Like if your body's sort of like, if you feel, you have to go on your feeling when you read them out. So yeah, I am surprised it's there, but at the same time, I think there is so much negativity going on around, if you look at the media and stuff like that, that people are actually just wanting to love bomb themselves with good words and, like kind of reprogram yourself from the negativity that's out there, which leads us on to the next one, which is doom scrolling.
Number 5.
Number 5. Scrolling. So is the affirmations to as an antidote to doom scrolling. I love a little doom scroll.
Yeah, right. Well, I actually don't. So I actually really hardly ever go on Facebook anymore. I don't mind Instagram. I prefer Instagram to Facebook. I find Instagram much more, positive. So yeah, I actually don't like it.
I'm unfortunately am on Twitter, which is probably most. Yeah.
Well, yes, I took myself off Twitter 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. I
only got on it 2 years ago. Like it's kind of,
So if you have a look at it now, so I've just looked it up. So according to Google here, the first thing that comes up there, doom scrolling or doom surfing is the act of spending an excessive amount of screen time devoted to the absorption of negative news. Increased consumption of predominantly negative news may result in harmful and psychological responses in some people. That's fascinating. So I can tell you what, I don't doom scroll on Facebook, and I generally don't sort of doom scroll on news sites. However, I have found myself spending a lot more time on YouTube lately.
YouTube, yeah.
And there's, I think that what worries me is what the algorithms are doing. And my concern with doom scrolling is that I think that what comes through whatever you're scrolling through, whether it's Facebook or YouTube, maybe not so much Twitter. I don't really know how much Twitter works, but Instagram's the same. You know, you can, once you start looking at certain things, you generally fed the same sort of things.
It's on YouTube, absolutely. But what I do is I deliberately go and look up really positive stuff. Like there's on YouTube, there's heaps of spiritual teachers I follow and stuff. So I balance it out. So my YouTube looks like, you know, like it's doom scrolling, but also the spiritual stuff. But you've got to be careful.
You've got to be very careful of that, because I think that you're really susceptible to confirmation bias.
Yeah,
that's the biggest issue that I have. So I find myself sometimes thinking, I'm just sort of getting the same point of view all the time here whenever I'm sort of scrolling through any kind of social media site now. And that's a concern for me, because I think it's much more difficult to get balanced information when you're constantly getting things that affirm your idea or affirm your opinion or something.
I think, Sean, I've always had a pretty good bullshit meter. So I'm always challenging myself to go, okay, I'm listening. If I find that I'm listening to the same thing over again, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go and listen to another point of view. That's why I deliberately follow people that I don't particularly like, even on Twitter, or believe in their views. I deliberately follow them so that I'm getting the extremes from both sides, as you could say, on Twitter. But yeah, it's always been important to me. Like I'm just want to consume everything. I've always been like that. So, but it's pretty scary what's happening with the algorithms, and even the censorship is incredible. Like stuff that you've been watching is now, just even the last few days, is not available anymore to. It's been taken off. Yeah. Like the censorship's incredible. Like and that to me is probably even more frightening than just doom scrolling, I think.
Yeah. Well, I look like later on in this podcast, I'd love to talk a little bit more about the media. Yeah. But let's have a look at the last thing that you found there, which was something extra. This is the most interesting thing, I think.
Yeah, I haven't even had time to see what this is about. The world search for sea shanties more in 2021 than any other time in Google.
So what can we say about sea shanties? Do you know any sea shanties?
No, I have no idea. I actually thought, what the hell is that about? Is it because we're Australian? We don't really. Is it a thing overseas? I don't know.
I don't know. People should send us some messages. Get on our Instagram page and send us what your favourite sea shanty is. Oh, look, I love a sea shanty. My thought is, Melanie, is that I've been a musician for a long time. Maybe it's just that music is going back underground. I mean, it's so hard to put any shows on. It's so hard to put a tour on. It's so hard to play any gigs at the moment with so much uncertainty about traveling and border restrictions, caps on numbers in venues, lockdowns, all that sort of stuff. So it's been very hard for the music industry, and musicians and the entertainment industry in general. So maybe it's people are looking to get back to that grassroots kind of music, a little bit of a fiddle and an acoustic guitar and a banjo and a mandolin. I love it.
Yeah, well, I think there's been a lot of discussion around the way that different rules have been applied to sports and music, right? Like, so sport's been going on the whole time, like professional sport, and music's just been smashed. And, I think overwhelmingly people, as much as they love sport, they love music too, and people wondering about the inequality there with being the rules and the regulations being applied to music have been nowhere near as free and flexible as sport. And I think people really miss seeing gigs or consuming music in a way that
absolutely. Melanie, look, I'm in two bands and I play drums for a solo artist. I haven't done a show. I haven't done a gig in 18 months. I think the last gig I did was it was at least 18 months ago. So, we've had some rehearsals and we've had some jams. But I tell you what musicians have done is they're getting together at people's houses and they're jamming on acoustic guitars and little bongo drums and little cajon drums and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And we're still playing. Everyone's still playing music. I mean, I'm playing as much music as I ever have, but it's generally at home on my own, or it's with another mate or another couple of guys, or in a very small gathering environment, and that's where music is at the moment. And you know what? I think there's going to be an explosion of creativity from it. I think there's going to be a lot of really great music come out in the next couple of years. And I think it's going to be a lot more earthy and a lot more emotional than what music has been for the last 10 years. And I think it's going to be a really positive thing, actually.
Yeah, I also think regardless of what choice you make, and we're talking about vaccination here, it's not actually pleasant going out, like checking in and wearing masks, and it's not the same experience. And I think doing more things at home, whether that is to do with music or just having more family gatherings in the home. Look, I think once initially people get out and about and they go back to a cafe or pub, I think that is actually going to change. I think if things stay the same long term in terms of making it really difficult to go out, like it isn't a pleasant experience. I don't know anyone who just doesn't miss. Remember when you could just walk into a pub and have a beer, or just even a small band? And I just think, that you're right. That I think things will become more organic. I think that
absolutely
in many ways, and food, we can see that with food, right? Like people
food,
with markets,
entertaining. It's much more about inviting people around and cooking up a nice meal, and or getting some really good ingredients on a barbecue, and playing a bit of music and having a good laugh. It's changed, I guess. Maybe not so much for the worst.
No, I think it'll take us a while to see what's going to come out of this. And of course it goes back to maintaining mental health. It's just so uncertain, even leading up to Christmas, right? All around the world again. Looks like there's going to be more lockdowns. And, I mean, this is the thing, and Christmas for most people is a time when they do get with family. It's not always all joyful, and Christmas can be really stressful, right?
I think it's more stressful now than it ever has been.
People are always surprised, like when I worked at the child support agency for a long time, when I was helping separated parents, January, we had to put on extra staff because that is the most popular month to separate, right? Like families just kind of, after Christmas, January is just a really stressful financially, people's relationships break. So I think it's really important that we have this discussion today about how, and interesting about maintaining mental health going into Christmas when people aren't really sure what's going to be happening, and adding that extra stress on. I think it's going to be really, and again, people not getting over borders to be able to be with their families. Because some people have just decided that it's too hard.
Well, it is. I mean, it's been 2 years now since I've seen my mother, who lives in southwest New South Wales. So you know what it's like trying to get over the border into Queensland. It's been pretty much impossible.
Yeah.
And then there's always the risk that I've been able to get down to New South Wales, but then the chance of being locked down and then having to isolate. I've got a small business. So there's just no way that I'd be able to do 2 weeks quarantine and keep my business running. It'd just collapse, really.
Yeah.
So I haven't been able to take that risk. And so, my mother has now watched her 5-year-old daughter and her 2 other grandsons that live on the Gold Coast basically grow up over the last 2 years over Zoom.
Yeah.
Over FaceTime. And that's been very difficult.
And I think that leads us on to, what we were going to talk about, which is, what's the way through this? Like, where do we go? How do we maintain any sort of normal life at the moment? Going into what looks like every week's just going to be more and more of this. It's
a difficult time. Leading up to Christmas is a very difficult time because, it's stressful for everyone. There seems to be this deadline of the 25th of December where you have to have all of this stuff done. I know what it's like from my work. It just seems like everyone wants everything done before Christmas. Even though, I could easily be doing it 2 or 3 days after Christmas. It wouldn't really make much of a difference, but there's these looming deadlines. Everyone that wants to catch up before Christmas. And then there's the issue of well, how do you maintain those relationships with people that you can't catch up with? We can't get across borders. We can't travel on planes, or we can't. It's very hard. So, I mean, on my personal experience, Mel, FaceTime and video calls have been like the lifeblood, really.
Well,
That's how we do it. That's how me and my family have done it. I don't know how we would have had been able to get through, having a relationship where, like, I still think that my little daughter has a good relationship with her grandmother, even though she hasn't physically seen her for 2 years. She's been lucky enough that she kind of gets to, talk on the video and goes around and shows her things and shows her a new school uniform and what she's been working on at kindy and all that sort of stuff. I don't know how you do it any other way.
Well, what we also have to talk about is the elephant in the room is Christmas Day, which can be really tough for people, and just add alcohol and what gets talked about, and like this year is going to be a minefield, right? Like,
absolutely,
particularly talking about vaccination and
absolutely
people's choices. I'm already seeing that people are uninviting people because of their decisions. People have broken relationships with their own parents, with their grandparents, with their, like siblings. And this is not being talked about. This is not being talked about, like what that's going to look like over Christmas.
Absolutely. Look, it's had an impact on our family. So, like, in my personal opinion, it doesn't, I don't really think it, like what your decision on whether or not you take the vaccine should be utterly your decision. Like, it's, but I just can't believe how much of a divide this issue of vaccine mandates has had such an impact on family, friends, and workplaces. I was really worried 6 months ago, before that, as to what was going to happen around vaccine passports and the mandates. I could see issues early on. And you know what it's like here in Australia, Melanie, it came on very hard and fast.
Very hard and fast.
We were told that there was going to be no mandates, and, officially there's no mandates, but then there was a whole lot of mandates, and it's been very difficult for everyone.
Well, and that's the thing. And I think you and I know Australians who actually are kind of, it depends on what you consume, but when I tell people that people are actually marching around the world for us and talking about us on, like, oh, we don't want, what's happening in Australia, and people are like, oh, really? So I guess there's different realities even with your own country, but I'm very concerned, and I've yes, at the shocking speed of it. And the fact that our Prime Minister said absolutely no vaccine passports, and that is what they are. And people, like, we've lost 5,000 nurses alone in New South Wales, and people have been, nurses the whole time. Oh, nurses are now, I think it's incredible how quickly things have escalated in Australia with that type of what's happening. And we're the only country in the world still that does not allow its own citizens to travel freely within their country. Like it is with the borders. I mean, anyone who's from wanting to see family in WA, it doesn't matter whether you're vaccinated or not, you're not getting there.
Right. I mean, Western Australia may as well be another country now.
Yeah. And I just, just even that identity as a nation and traveling freely about, and I'm seeing families who've got very sick children, and I've got dying relatives who still can't get over borders, who made the decision to vaccinate to do that. And this week they've been stopped from doing that. So that's truly devastating. And I really think there is that people who may not have been questioning as much, who are now like, this seems really, it's completely inhumane what is happening really in our own country. lots of countries around the world, but I think Australia's been shocking. New Zealand is I'm seeing some really distress, like my partner's dad is in New Zealand. The same things are happening there. You know, and it's really, I think that's been the saddest thing for me to see what's happened here.
Yeah, and it's going to be a tough time over this Christmas with people are having some very differing opinions, and just that alcohol, I think everyone has to be really aware of what's going to happen. Mel, you've been a family counsellor before. What's your advice? What's your advice to people over this Christmas period?
I'm really big on setting boundaries. So, yeah, I always say to people, I think at the moment, and I've done this myself in conversations where you really, really make a conscious decision at the start of the morning to actually not discuss anything about particularly vaccines or COVID. And I actually think there's an appetite for that now. But of course, when there's alcohol involved, that can be, you know, that's where I would say is put some boundaries around alcohol. But actually, if you've got a big family thing happening on Christmas Day, then you actually have that conversation straight up, just like put it on the table, like, you know, what we're going to focus on today is rebuilding as a family and meeting here today. That's going to be hard in families that are already reasonably dysfunctional, and that is the case, Sean. Like, a lot of people go and have to go to family gatherings where they don't really want to be, knowing what happens every year. So they're going to have, I think you're actually going to even have to make a choice there where you may not want to go to a particular family event, but you're going to have to make that choice yourself. Like, I would advise that to people. Like, if you really just want to hang out with people you know you're going to feel good with all day.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, you know, you probably have to take a little bit of personal responsibility as well, and know when to just stop a conversation and walk away, or take on another activity and change the subject of whatever it is. And you know, I think that, you know, a lot of that people just need to sort of understand themselves that they might be starting to get a little bit worked up or a little frustrated, and then they need to be able to just say, look, let's go and do something else. Let's play some cricket. Let's go and have a swim in the pool.
And what I would say to people, and this is what I used to do, particularly for family mediation around Christmas time, is just have breakfast. Breakfast is the safest, you know, go and have breakfast at your parents or your in-laws or whoever, and then spend the rest of the day with your kids, or with your kids. Kids are always a great way to bring people back.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Like, because, you know, I was at an outdoor event last night, and kids were dancing, and it just was had even more joy attached to it for what's been happening over the last couple of years. So I would think that you'd be pretty safe. Breakfast around kids, and then if go your separate ways. Like, and don't be afraid to just go off by yourself if you don't have close connection to family, you don't have your own kids. You know, one year I was in that situation, and I volunteered to serve food at the shelter down the road here in Newcastle. So if you already know that you haven't got plans and you don't, that's a boundary. Understanding that you might not want to actually even hang out with family on Christmas Day. That's a really tough one to bring up, but that, you know, that's a really viable option. You know, if it's something that you know is just going to cause you even more stress. But I do know there are families too, also not political at all, and won't, you know, that won't apply. But this is for people who know that conversation's coming up. But yeah, get it out on the table early. I think the all day stuff's probably gone this year. You know, the all day drinking around with family, I think that could be dangerous. But yeah, I think it's just being upfront about things and just focusing on simple stuff like good food.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, watching the grog. Like, everyone likes a drink on Christmas Day, but, you know, I think everyone knows they feel better for just having a couple of beers too. Like, if you're drinking all day, and particularly up there in Queensland, you know what it's like, Sean, like, gets super hot. People get,
yeah.
You know, like, and I think as much as possible have it outdoors. I actually really believe external environments actually create a better mood in an outing. Like when you're in a house and people are just, there's noise and stuff, that's what people don't think about that.
Yeah, so for our Northern Hemisphere listeners, we have quite a lot,
Oh,
Melanie.
yes, we
do
do
have quite a
actually.
lot.
Yeah.
I don't know if they'd be able to
No.
have it outside and jump in the pool and stuff like that. So
No.
for all you guys listening north of the equator, down here in sunny Australia, it's hot at Christmas.
Yeah.
Hot, 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 hot. So
Yes.
yeah, outside events are a really good idea.
But you can still apply the same, if you're inside.
Oh, you can still play some games. If you're inside, you can still,
But yeah, I think boundaries is the most important. Like having that conversation in the morning, like we're going to, not talk about COVID or vaccines today. We're just going to pretend it's 2019.
So Mel, before we get on to some highlights of 2021, what was some of the things that you saw this year that that really got your attention, and what are your observations?
So one thing I would say is that I think, like a lot of people, I thought, I always love a new year. So I thought, like at the end of last year, I do think, like a lot of people, naturally you just thought it was going to be over. Like you were going to move in, and it was just that hit. Because I actually think this has been a far more difficult year if you think about it.
Absolutely.
For everyone, like in terms of the world. So I have been feeling quite disconnected, which is really hard for me because I'm a big community person. And I think this year particularly has highlighted to me, well, how am I going to create a life after this in other ways, in new ways? What will that look like? So I've actually really been thinking about that the last few months, about what I want to create, because I can't see in this present moment how things have changed positively in I guess on a bigger scale. So I'm sort of like, well, what have I learnt about myself over the last couple of years, and what's that going to look like in the future? I actually think it's, for the first time ever, it's really difficult for me to do long-term planning. Like I'm actually just don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I think there's that sort of nervousness. I think a lot of people have, like, okay, well, what's coming? And it's how do you harness that energy into creativity? Like, and I think that's the key. So I think that's where I've always loved nature and getting out in nature and water. And that is absolutely my solace now. Like, and it's probably where I go to if I just really need to ground myself and center myself back in the present. So it's really just, it's been about being aware that those simple things can bring a certain peace. And it's from that place of peace that I can visualize a future. I think it's really hard at the moment. So I guess it's been more about reiterating the skills this year around how do I reconnect back into myself and how do I create from that place, and not doom scrolling, which and being aware of how that makes me feel. Like something like doom scrolling, now I'm like, okay, I've got to get out of this pretty quickly, because it's not, I can't do anything from that place.
Yeah. Well, like I said, one of the big observations for me this year was how my trust in the media and news and information has just eroded so much in the last 12 months. I just can't believe, how much, misinformation is out there, how much, how much exaggeration, how much it's just intense. I mean, honestly, Melanie, it's got to the stage where you almost can't read a weather report or a report on the weather without it being completely
dramatized, right?
Dramatized. Like I'll give you an example that, my work, I work with gardens, that's my day job. So I'm pretty interested in what's happening with the weather each day. It really dictates what I'm going to do and what what jobs I'm going to allocate, how my workflow is going to go, what staff I need, whatever it is. So I'm really kind of watching the weather all the time. And there was a report a couple of weeks ago that said, there was this huge megastorm event that was going to hit the east coast of Australia. And so I look at it and think, oh, wow, this looks like it's going to be full on. Well, I've got this job booked on. And I'm like, oh, how am I going to get through the week if I'm going to have all this rain? And then it said megastorms are on the way, going to hit Sydney and southern Queensland. And then it said Brisbane has already been smashed. And I thought to myself, well, we had a little bit of rain last night, but it would have been a fairly moderate shower. There was sort of rolling thunder and a little bit of sheet lightning, but there was no wind or fierce hail or any kind of massive storm. It was just like a nice downpour for 20 minutes or so during the evening. I'm looking outside and it's perfect weather. And then those storms never came.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you can't even trust that kind of reporting, then what else is there? So for me, I've really sort of moved away from mainstream or commercial media, and I've just found myself some really good independent journalists that are putting out really good material that are balanced, looking at both sides of the argument. And so I guess for me, I've seen a big destruction in mainstream media, but I've seen the growth of really good independent journalism. So that's the positive I can see out of it, I guess.
I think what we really need to talk about as a society moving forward is the complete mistrust in medical and health and doctors and all different opinions about that I think that has been held up to be media. I think there's always been that sense of, okay, well, is that accurate? But I think the completely different opinions, and you have to really search for this outside of what you're hearing mainstream health messages, but I think that has been the most destructive to me moving forward with health messages, and that the fear, like the actual extreme messages that come from even in the medical community. So not just talking about health bureaucrats here, but actual vastly different opinions of doctors and nurses. And that, I think that's something that is going to be interesting moving forward. And I agree. I think people are really interested in how they maintain and look after their health now, systems, and how they can make themselves healthier. So I think that's going to be a big thing. And I think that's come about from distrust as well.
I think you're right. I think there's a lot of mistrust out there, and it's how do we get that back? There's got to be big accountability on the media, I think, and I think some really good independent journalists are coming through, and now with their platforms that they've got, I mean, they're getting as big a following, if not bigger following, than some of those.
Well, podcasts, Sean, are making, there's some really big podcasts out there. But just while I was thinking about it, I think the big thing with trust is, it all comes back to individual trust, like trusting yourself, trusting your intuition. Now is the time for people, I think, to really start to know what self-trust is, self-love. What's your body telling you? What's your gut telling you? Is that something that you really want to eat today, or you want to eat this? Or, what is it? What's the next step I want to take without being told what it is that I need to do? Like, I really think it's about inner authority now. And people have been taught that isn't valid.
Yeah.
Over the last 2 years, what you've actually been feeling about things, and whether you might have had some questions about this and that, you've actually been invalidated everywhere. Whether that is by media, family, doctors, and your own experience has been completely obliterated.
Yeah.
That's what it comes down to, is the reconnection with self. And, it's what I wrote about recently. It's about, well, we know mother's instinct is a thing, but is that going to be fake news soon? Like, really? Like, is your own instincts about your body, mind, and soul is that going to be taken over by opinions and, oh, that's not how you should feel or what you should think? That's, I think, is a really, that trust in self that's been compromised, I think. And I think that's moving forward, that's going to be really important for people.
Absolutely. So let's talk about moving forward. It's obviously been a very challenging year. So let's look forward now to 2022. So look, you know what our podcast is about. I don't have to tell you, you're the co-host and basically the founder and set it all up. But so let's talk about what we always talk about at the end of every discussion, and let's go to the hope. Like, how do we move into the light, Melanie? What are we going to do in 2022? What approaches are you going to take for next year? What approaches are you going to take for you to enter 2022 as positively as you can and make a positive impact?
I think forgiveness is going to be massive, and gratitude. So I've been still doing my gratitude list every night, and that's been amazing. But for some reason, forgiveness is coming up for me for next year, around, and whatever that means for whoever's listening. But I've been quite hurt by a lot of things over the last couple of years, and all born out of COVID and restrictions and how people are feeling about that. But I'm feeling that I really want to reconnect back with community and just the person on the street. I'm not talking about, like the bigger sense, but it's just particularly masks, people wearing masks. I found it really hard to, not seeing people's smiles and things like that. Like, I'm really finding that tough, really just wanting for that, to rebuild that. Like,
okay.
Just
so
that.
How are you going to do it? What are you going to do?
Well, I've just really made myself, when I walk out the door now, I'm just like, well, what am I giving off? What vibes am I giving off? Like, and I've made a huge difference in, like, how I'm walking and putting my shoulders back. And I know it sounds, but I actually walk around with pride, and I just try to engage people with my eyes, and I've just started going back to saying hello and not being suspicious of people in that. Not that I, So I'm going to just try and do that small stuff every day. Like, how are you? I actually was carrying some tree bark the other day for an art project I'm doing. And the guy across the road is council work, and he brings the bin along every day because it's the cafe's, all rubbish. And he just yelled across what did he yell? He yelled across the road at me, and he said, "Oh, are we out of toilet paper again?" And I just, and you know what? I felt my heart. So I'm just like, those small interactions, because I think that's what's been lost. So that just made me happy for the rest of the day, just to have that little laugh with a stranger.
Great.
So, yeah. So what do you think, Sean, for you?
For me, Mel, it's going to be all about going back to basics. My little girl last night actually said to me, "Dad, I don't want to go to the supermarket as much anymore. And I think we waste too much money on food. So we need to grow more of our own food." We've always had a little herb garden and stuff like that. So actually today we spent the whole morning today building a couple of gardens with some little fruit and vegetable trees and things like that. We're gonna focus on that in our house. We're going to do a lot more growing our own stuff, and hopefully eating a lot more of our own food, and maybe swapping some things with people and stuff like that. So we're going to go back to basics, and I want to just have a lot more sort of smaller gatherings. Just I want to entertain at home more. I want to do more cooking. For people, I want to have friends around and long conversations.
Yep.
And I want to spend more time playing the kind of music that I have been over the last couple of months as well, on a musical level, just jamming with friends and jamming with different people and learning a couple of different genres of music and getting out of my comfort zone. But for me, it's all back to basics. That's what I'm going to focus on next year. And I think I'm going to go into 2022 being really positive on that side of things. That I think that, you know, a lot of things are being taken away from us. There's been a lot of freedoms eroded, and a lot of control from government, and a lot of noise, and a lot of energy that's been really negative and destructive. And I want to try and kind of break through that noise and get back to basics. And I think if we can do that, if everyone can kind of really focus on the basic, simple things, it's just much easier to be happy when you've got getting the simple things right.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to do. That's how I'm going into 2022. And that's going to be my hope for next year, is that everyone sort of refocuses on the basics and finds those simple things in life.
And what you love about people and love about yourself. Like,
absolutely.
That's yeah. But I think that's, well, I think we've covered a lot, Sean.
Absolutely.
Ended on a, yeah.
So Melanie, Merry Christmas. Thanks for a wonderful year. It's been our breakthrough year this year. So
trending in all parts of the world. We'll be sharing that with you shortly, how we've been trending.
It's very exciting.
Very exciting.
So you have a Merry Christmas, and I'm sure we'll catch up over the phone and over Zoom, but I just want to publicly say that it's been wonderful working with you this year. I want to wish all of our previous guests a very Merry Christmas. I know most of them have had massive challenges throughout the year, and we're in contact with them all, and they all seem to be going really well. So I want to wish them a very Merry Christmas. And I want to wish all of our listeners that have been very loyal to us, Melanie. We've had some really great loyal listeners. And thanks for all of your feedback and your comments and your questions. And so Merry Christmas, everyone. I hope the rest of the year is peaceful and joyful with your family and friends, and that the new year is going to bring some really great things for you all. So Merry Christmas, everyone, and Happy New Year.
Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy New Year.
See you, folks. Bye.
Bye.